Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Coffee and No Code with me, Gary Hoberman. In these sessions we've been bringing technology visionaries and our customers and leaders in the industry to talk to you about what's really happening, the future of technology, what do we see? And what I'm doing a little bit different this time is I'm actually going to walk you through a lot of the questions we heard as our customers started to talk about the future in the way that we think about it, which is codeless architecture. And there was a lot of questions as to what does this mean? How is this different? So in this session today, I'm going to kick off a series, which will be educating the audience on what is codeless architecture. How is this the future of technology? How is this different than what's been done today? And so with that, I also wanted to start to bring leaders of our company together, visionaries inside our company making this happen. And so with that, I brought Marcos, our Chief Information Security Officer, and Nick, our Head of Evangelists. And I guess real quick, Marcos, if you could do your intro for the audience would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. So as Gary mentioned, Marcos Crisadante II, Unqork's Chief Information Security Officer. Diverse background in security. So prior to joining Unqork, I was the global CISO at Gartner for about 4 years. Before that, I spent time in financial services at a large hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, for about 5 years. And I also held a number of other security leadership roles in consulting. I was an adjunct faculty member teaching cybersecurity courses. And I also served in the U.S. Army as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcos. Nick?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Nick Gamble. You might see the Uncoder listed here. So you might have seen our Twitch streams on Thursday, which is part of our developer evangelism effort that we're pushing out far and wide here at Unqork. Prior to joining Unqork, I spent decades plus as an engineer myself, or leading teams of engineers. And since I joined Unqork, had led a number of our implementations for some of our biggest clients. Took some of that experience to start building capabilities of Unqork using Unqork. And that just really excited me so much about the platform over the last few years that I wanted to start sharing that with the rest of the world.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. Now, you're seeing a slide up here, and the slide is asking, does this look at all familiar? The reason why is because we continue to see this in every single one of the clients that we meet with across every single industry. And most important, it's what we experienced as we came from the corporate world and understand what's been happening today. We're in a world where technology and digital has advanced so much. As users, we experience that today. And yet when you look inside large enterprises, what you're going to find is disconnected data, screens with multiple tabs open. The term swivel chair is something we've heard a lot. The term we never get to phase 2 is something we've also heard a lot. And from a customer point of view, it's disconnected customer and employee experiences, whoever the user is. We still see Excel as being used and end user computing being used in production systems, which should never be the case. We see diagrams that could cover an entire wall, 8-foot wall, about the architecture of the system, which looks like spaghetti when you step back. So with that, things actually haven't changed so much. And this is something which I entered the corporate world and working on Wall Street to fix it. So we created Unqork to solve these problems. And these problems were specifically around how do you create software, enterprise grade software. And so we created the category of enterprise no code. More specifically, what we've invented, and this is something our customers have helped us along this journey find and follow through. We invented Codeless Architecture Standard, which is the future of software development today. And with that, there's been a lot of fun recognition. You're going to be meeting the leaders and the team who've helped do this. But I have to call out in the past 2 or 3 weeks, like just some of the things we've seen. We were honored to be in Fast Company's as the number 5 most innovative enterprise software company. And we were the youngest on the company by list, by 6 years. And then you could look at HFS released their first ever top 25 SaaS companies that add value to CIOs based on 1,000 CIOs contributions. And on that list, we appeared and we're the youngest by 6 years. And, we have Forrester adding us to their list for the first time last year, and we were the youngest by 10 years. So we're making a difference. And it required a new way of thinking to solve the problems that we see on the previous page. And it's problems that each of our customers, when we walk into a customer and we show that slide and we say, does this look familiar to you? And if not, we'll save you a lot of time. We could end this presentation right now and save each other time. The reality is every aspect of that, from the Post-it notes to the Excel, is something that people still resonate today. And it's amazing, no matter if a business is old or new, The problems haven't changed. So with that, when you think about why those problems haven't changed, we talk about our customers and our customers helping us drive a technology platform and the standard in a way which helps meet their need. The customers are not small companies. It had to be done with enterprise scale, large grade software companies who expect the most from you. Companies that would normally expect the SOC 2 and the Privacy Shield and aspects that Marcos will talk about, and understand performance and scalability and the ilities that I'll be talking about in a few minutes. And those companies have helped us bring this technology together, but most importantly, bring a standard together called Codeless Architecture. When you think about what it means, Codeless Architecture, it really comes down to how do you apply it. And the way you apply it is by driving innovation across an organization. And with that, you can think about it from three different ways. First, an integrated source of the truth. No, this is not what you think of as like, let's just put lipstick on the old systems. It's about an orchestrated, integrated system with rich presentation that basically could make all of the other technology in your company look seamless and work together to present a single source to your customers or your employees. And this is something that's new. I could tell you it's not something that's been done before we entered with Codeless Architecture. Time to market is critical. Are you able to basically automate those complex workflows and scale for operational efficiencies in a time that makes sense? Regulations change, customers' needs change. How do you adapt? How fast can you move? It's all critical to basically Codeless Architecture and the way it works. And finally, most important is happy customers, customer satisfaction. Are you able to create those experiences, that digital engagement, the digital transformation needed to engage the customer in whatever platform they're sitting in today, whichever device, wherever they are, and service them in a way that they're expecting you to? And that's really what it comes down to. When you think about what drives alignment across an organization, it requires the right technology and those aspects of it. I'm going to step back and kind of reminisce a little bit. So I remember writing my first assembler program on, it was an XT88 machine. It was kind of fun. My dad had punch cards before that, but, the assembler really stood out and, understanding binary code. I've been there through the journey. I remember Visual Basic 1.0 at the same time as using Power Builder data tables and data sheets. And I remember at the same time Goop to SQL Windows. The journey we've been on, if you step back of software, is a journey of abstraction. It's a journey of how do we abstract away those binary fields, the bits and bytes, the moves, the pushes, to a place where we can move faster and adapt faster to the needs of our enterprises and our customers. And that journey we've been on, if you think about it from abstraction, has occurred over time. And I would basically say it started with the low-level languages. It went to, from COBOL to C++ and Visual Basic Java. There's a lot of higher-level languages that appeared. JavaScript, Python, .NET. The list could be endless. Haskell, Clojure, Go, they're all there. There's a lot of low-code software that basically promised the world. It promised we're going to move faster. It promised we could help you actually achieve more with less resources in a reduced time frame and with lower support costs going forward. But when you actually step back and look, as we have done, and I've personally experienced as a CIO of Fortune 50 companies, the reality is that last bit never happened. It's a very different picture when you start to map the productivity of an engineer over the actual timeline of software creation. And you'll see, the low-level languages to higher-level languages, we're able to get a 25% boost, and those low-level languages from assembler was a 25% boost, so 50% up. But all of a sudden, for the past 10 to 15 years, we've actually reduced, for the first time ever, the output of engineers. It's become harder. Now, applications have become more complex. Needs have become more complex. We've broken down applications into further components from microservices. It's not about a single software that will solve all problems. We realize that. So integration becomes key, and engineering is critical and key. So specifically, when you think about why we created Unqork, this was the picture I was living with as a CIO. It was trying every solution to basically move faster, better, and cheaper, instead of telling the customer to choose 2 or 3. But this is the solution that we address with specifically Codeless Architecture. So the next frontier of software development is codeless. There's no question about this. It's about abstraction of code into reusable components, empowering a new level of flexibility. And specifically what you'll see I threw on here is something from experience. what I personally saw with $1 billion budget I was spending within Fortune 50 companies, and that was directly in my control, 80% of that budget was spent in keep the lights on, just keeping things running that was being created in the past. And that's all of that. Basically, you can imagine all the spending and all those creations going up that curve, dropping down a little bit with productivity and falling off, because every single thing that was created, no matter which language it was used, fell into this bucket of keep the lights on. In that bucket, there are terms, there are terms like end of life. And you live for end of life projects. There are terms for the continuity of business and for data retention, and everything falls into this bucket, from the ethical hack testing requirements of software all the way through just the simple maintenance upgrades of the systems around it and the machines around it. So we invented Codeless Architecture, but it's an open standard. It's not about Unqork. It's about a standard of how to create software with a new level of agility and flexibility. And that's what we're bringing to market. Specifically, when we created Unqork, we came from the enterprise. So I used to spend every Friday morning going through the list of the outages for the previous week and reviewing the changes coming in the following week. Every single time there was a vulnerability assessment, ethical hack, we'd be talking with other CIOs. The reality is we call that the illities. And everyone on this call knows what an illity is, right? The security, the reliability, the agility you need, the usability, all these. Composability is something we added that's critical for us. But the reality is these illities are what it means to be enterprise grade. It's day one. Every software needs to have these. It needs to have this in a way which basically meets the needs. We've taken it to another level through Codeless Architecture. So with that, I'm going to ask to start with Marco's just talking a little bit about how we think of security. Because I used to be, as a CIO, I would sit with other CIOs and sit and hear from the FBI directors of cyber. And what their recommendation to us was the best thing we could do is to create a network of CIOs and CISOs to communicate when something's happening from one of us, that we could share it with the others to be prepared. We've taken this to a whole new level, and something which I personally, I thought was possible, but it's amazing to see it actually in action. And it is not just possible, but real. So Marcos, if you could just give us a little bit of your perspective on how you think of security, because cyber is the thing I'm always asked what keeps me up at night. Cyber is the number one thing that always keeps me up at night. It's a thing that everyone should be kept up at night. And it's a thing that's outside of your platform. And so with that, Marcos, please take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Gary. So in addition to kind of what you described as speed and quality, I really like to look at Codeless Architecture as that next level of abstraction that improves, as you mentioned, security, security, compliance, and also reliability. But if we were to take a step back and really look at what AWS, what Azure and GCP have done for our industry, they've abstracted away the need to manage data centers, which essentially meant that we no longer need to manage physical hardware vulnerabilities. So no longer are the days of firmware or server updates using things such as floppy disk or CDs, really allowing us to focus more on software security using virtual servers, applications, and code. But as you described, Gary, now with Codeless Architecture, enterprises don't need those virtual servers anymore. They don't need code to build highly complex applications, which means that those security teams, myself and others, we can now shift our focus from server patching and code security to now focusing more on architecture, to focus more on integration, to focus more on API security and configuration. Now on the platform side, from an Unqork perspective, we manage a single version of our platform software, and that software is regularly tested. And so we actually encourage our customers to conduct their own security tests. And so if you think about that from a benefits perspective, if a customer was to find a security bug, or if a pen testing provider was to find a security bug, or if we were to find it, we would fix that bug one time, and that would benefit all of our customers with that one single patch. Now, we're also single tenant, so our customers do get full segmentation of their environments from other customers, and they own their own data, and they're able to encrypt that data with the keys that they own as well. If you think about it from a compliance perspective, as Gary, you described, we've got customers in across a number of highly regulated industries, and oftentimes they have very bespoke compliance requirements. But with Codeless Architecture, we've been able to assist them with meeting those obligations, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's GDPR, PCI, implementing advanced technologies such as tokenization to encrypt certain data fields or to apply certain controls around their specific application use cases. I guess the last thing I'll say here is, since we are single tenant, those customers, they can choose the underlying cloud service provider of their choice, whether that is Azure or AWS. And with that, they would get a highly scalable and a highly reliable environment overall. So with that, Gary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and I mean, just that point on multi-cloud, it's something we built in. You can imagine how engineers day one were like, what do you mean we got to support multiple cloud providers and not use any of the cloud-specific native PaaS features? That was our discipline. And it's because we want to be able to actually move a customer between different cloud providers as they see fit, as their designs change, as the needs change, or span multiple cloud providers. You should never be locked into a single cloud provider ever with any software. Cloud providers each have their own features and benefits. They're all good at certain things. We make that invisible, which is really what that is. And the reliability aspect, it's critical. 99.99% uptime across all environments or all customers is what we support. And that's trading system level uptime that we need to basically run through. So with that, basically, let's go on to the next set of abilities. So composability, scalability, agility, and usability. This is all about engineers. It's about engineers and their needs and what they've been waiting for and what they've been asking us for. Composability, a design tool that is no code. That's what no code means to us. It's a designer. It's the aspect of how you create the software. That design tool doesn't have to be the only way you could create software in Codeless Architecture. We have other clients using their own design tools to generate our Codeless Architecture spec, which is brand new and amazing to see it in action. It's the first time I've seen business and IT work so closely together to deliver a single solution, and both of them get what they needed out of that relationship perfectly. So with that, composability is also out-of-the-box industry accelerators, and we have a marketplace, expensive marketplace, the first ever no code to bring everyone in together, which is what you need to create an ecosystem. Scalability, we had our first customer say, you can't go live until my instance, my single tenant, of an interpreted application. We don't generate code. We don't believe in compiled code. An interpreted application could support 100,000 concurrent users in an extremely complex loan type application processing, from underwriting through end users requesting. And 100,000 concurrent users, for those who know QA and testing, that's like 30 million users an hour at least in this platform. And we were able to do it seamlessly without any changes to the platform. And that's one client for one instance that we support. It's amazing. It auto scales, deploys globally to any of the cloud providers. Again, cloud agnostic is critical to your ability. When it comes time to agility, and Nick's going to demonstrate this in person, this is the most exciting aspect of Codeless Architecture. So there was always a vision of Java to say, hey, write once, run anywhere, right? That's what it said. But reality was it was never true. And it was always dependent on the JVM, the containers, the versions, the hardware. The reality is also that when you create software, it's not portable. If you, even in a low-code software, 70% is basically using out-of-box software. That 30% scripting could just even be scripting. And I'll give you, for those who don't know what I mean, Excel VBA, a macro is scripting. It's code. It's something which is going to basically break your future upgrades and create maintenance nightmares and support for those who know it and used it before. And I used to teach .NET. So while I taught .NET for 7 years at NYU for fun after work, what I was using at work was Java. I would never use that in any trading system I was building. And that's what Excel was. So agility itself to us is about portability. It's about being able to say, hey, I've got a definition somewhere stored that's almost like a semantic layer of an application. Can I reverse that into Unqork and have you generate the application or run the application for me? It's also about the IP is not locked in Unqork. That same IP could be reversed into any platform or any technology. And that's never been done before. The reason why it's never been done before is because even allowing a single line of scripting and code stops it. You would have to basically use AI and reverse engineers tool to understand what was happening. And yet, when you think about that, that's what Codeless Architecture prevents from happening. That's the goal of Codeless Architecture, no IP lock-in. As for usability, consumer grade UX. I know there's a question out there. We are, and you would never know where we're being used. We're all over the internet for end consumers, to call centers, to ops. We don't care about who the user is. The usability aspect takes on their experience. We don't have a brand. You won't see an Unqork branded website. But if you go to a site, and it could be even charitable donation sites you might see, it could be banking sites to open accounts, it could be trading systems, it will look like that company's UX, pixel perfect, consumer grade. But we've abstracted that experience and that presentation tier into a new level, whereby branding, if you ever rebrand. So I was in a company, went through rebranding once. It was a $110 million development project to rebrand. Colors, changes, logos, fonts. And on Unqork, it's one place to change it and maintain it that you have control over. And all your applications seamlessly move to the new brand, new colors, new fonts. That's what Codeless Architecture is about. So with that, most importantly, after all that, and I would say everything I just walked you through is table stakes. Everyone's got to basically meet those needs. Everyone should be able to say, here's how it's secure, here's how we address the LEDs, here's how we're enterprise, in order to have a conversation with each of you. But what's really unique about us and what's unique about Codeless Architecture is it's not about a single technology. What you have to realize is that no technology is the best at every single thing it needs to do. And what that means is that when we walk into a customer, they normally have 1,000, 8,000, 10,000 different technologies or assets already in their suite of tools. They're already using CRM tools from some of the big players. They're already using office suites and other aspects of how to actually do automation. They're using ERP suites to basically be general ledgers. And normally not one, normally it's 20 to 30. So the question is, how do you bring it all together to solve problems and bring all the assets, their assets that have been deployed? How do we make the assets actually work? So it doesn't look like the garbage on that first page with the Excel and the swivel chair and the multiple screens, multiple tabs, green screens. How do we make it actually come together? It's about a codeless architecture that lets you glue in all of your legacy components with all your modern technologies in a way which basically lets you really present a new face and abstraction that together will basically forever be that view of the world that's automatically maintained with no more end of life. And that's the critical aspect of it, is how do you get rid of the technical debt and stop the bleeding? And that's what it's really about, is how do you bring that together? So what's really cool is in a few minutes, Nick's going to bring this aspect to life. And he's going to actually show you what it means to walk into a company and say, you've already invested in all these assets. Let us show you how to actually make them work for you for the first time. How do you not spend 80% of your budget on keeping the lights on? Let's change the world. So with that, I just want to talk a little bit about the features of what Codeless means from a business point of view. So specifically, it's around integration. You have a lot of technology assets out there, as I mentioned. How do you bring them together into a single source of truth? Integration has to be codeless. You have to be able to map your tools and your technologies so that it's nothing but a simple field mapping. That's what we built. Integration also has to be bidirectional. So we should be able to basically update systems, retrieve data, as well as those systems should be able to communicate with us seamlessly without code. And that's all about creating reusable APIs, exposing that business logic as APIs. You should be able to basically do orchestration in a way which drives productivity. I've never seen it done before. As a CIO, I've tried every BPMN tool out there, and the BPM tool, the basic purpose of it was the business user to open it and then basically leave the tool to go to email and do something in email. There's no system integrations. There's no automation. Every single BPM tool I've ever seen couldn't handle the complexity of the real world needs of a tier one app for tier one customers. So with that, we basically created our own workflow tool, our own way to think about workflows. Parallelization has to support parallelization because that's the real world. It's not just about a single path, a happy path. It's about parallelized path, parallelized approvals. It's about being able to execute a workflow as an API. What a concept, but that's needed. And finally, it's about what I mentioned before, is the experience. The presentation layer has to be digital, has to be at a caliber which is pixel perfect, so it delights the customers. But it also has to be in a way which is easy to maintain and seamless for the customers to use. And we've done this, listed just a few of the customers over here who have even shared what they've done with Unqork. So Maimonides Medical Center, there's an amazing mobile app in the App Store right now from Maimonides Care, where you could pay your bills, check your claims, you could book an appointment with a doctor, you could actually see your medical results. And using AI, using Unqork, all built in with the entire application. It's amazing to see what was achieved through Goldman Sachs, who's been an amazing partner driving these requirements for us, making sure and using us as their system of record. And then from State Street, which is really proving out the scalability of the platform and diversity of the platform needs from all aspects. It's just been amazing. So with that, just a final aspect of this is about standards. It's about a standard that basically is more than just Unqork. It's about a codeless architecture standard. It's not about a simple tool and selecting a no-code or low-code tool. It's about defining the architecture in a way which sets your business up for success and digital transformation. So with that, the codeless definition, the standard, has to be transparent, portable, and updatable, and upgradable. So what we've seen is lower cost of maintenance. Your maintenance costs should actually go down. That chasm catching 80% of the spend should disappear, should be reduced. And we're seeing that with 65% lower cost of ownership in the apps. So this is something I've never seen before until our customers have shown us this with live data. Every single time we bring a customer live with a new feature, a new application, every new customer that goes live, the amount of bugs and defects goes down. It's exactly opposite to what I'm sure each of you has been experiencing your entire life in technology, which is for every single change you introduce in your technology environment, small, medium, big, doesn't matter, and it goes through your CAD process, probably your change review process, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to break something. Every single one of those changes. You want to add a simple field to a table, make sure it's optional because otherwise it'll break the next record entered. So with that said, we're seeing the exact inverse with our customers. We're watching them as the more and more they deploy and use our software, because it's a single instance of the code base, everyone's benefiting each other. And we're seeing 600 times less bugs than any software being created today, including 8 times less bugs than Linux operating system itself, which would be really the most bug-free software in the world. What that really means is you could launch applications 3 times faster. So we have the cheaper, we have the better, and the faster, all in those first 2 boxes. It's amazing. But what it comes down to is when you take an application and break it down to its components and say, what is making up the codeless architecture? It's about a definition file that contains the fields, the role-based access controls, the data fields, the rules, the actual workflow, the experience, all built into one. So with that, jumping right in, I'm going to skip this one slide as actually who's using it, because Nick, you're going to be the one to basically drive this. And let's drive through and actually show a little bit exactly how this works and give it a perspective. So I'm going to set up the demo here is going to be a live demo of what I just walked through for codeless architecture. There are technologies out there that we're seeing with our customers today that expose a definition, assuming there's no code introduced. So let's jump right in, Nick.
Great. Thanks, Gary. And yeah, I hope to hit on here, a lot of those abilities, the agility, the composability that you talked about, and really focus on how open standards have always been kind of the next great innovation in a lot of software industries. It solves fragmentation problems in industries. It solves the lock-in problems that you talked about earlier, Gary, and it creates that forum for systems to connect. And I think this is going to get that across. So as Gary said, there are a number of similar systems that have a definition that you can extract out. And what we're going to be able to do here is take that definition, whether it's in a ServiceNow, Salesforce, Power Apps, Airtable, so on, or even if it's in a spreadsheet. Gary talked about how there's a lot of production systems that are still running in Excel. Taking that in, taking JSON schema, number of different ways that you can port that into the codeless definition. And once you've done that, what you get out of that. So effectively, if I wanted to, now I've pre-done these, integrations, but if I were to do it from scratch here, I would merely select the source that I'm pulling this in from. I'd define the data model or the application in that source, and I would just hit go, okay, or hit migrate. Now, what do I get when I do that simple transformation? I'm going to get something like this. I'm going to get a module in Unqork that contains all of the data attributes from that other system, inclusive of any of the business rules and validations that come along with it. So that could be whether or not it's required. It can be how long it's allowed to be, so on and so forth. But what's really interesting is on top of just getting the data attributes themselves and the ability to collect that, as you're running it on top of the open standard, on top of that codeless standard, you're also going to get connectors back into those systems. because as Gary was saying, everything is represented in that codeless definition. It's not just data. It's actually that logic. It's actually that connectivity. So the API calls that are needed to talk back to those systems, whether it's to create that data or to read the data out of that system, is all represented in the codeless standard. So this was the output, auto-generated for me, an exact representation of what exists in this case in Salesforce. Now, how did we actually get to that? Now, first and foremost, exposing that open standard as an API for you. So in this case, you could say, I have a data type, regardless of the system that it's in, even if it's written in code and I've represented in a SQL database or something, I have the need for a string, right? And I want to define some fields against that string, or attributes about it, what label it should be, the maximum length, whether or not it's required, so on and so forth. By simply hitting against a codeless API, you're going to get back the definition, right? And then you can go use that in your application. So this API was used to construct dynamically the module I showed you before. What you also then get is that representation inside of Unqork. So actually, let me show it over here first. Over in these snippets, these are reusable pieces of that open standard that you can use all throughout your application building process. So these are all available to me now. So anytime I pull one of them in, it's going to come with all the validations, again, that I extracted and transformed into that codeless standard. And you can see the details of that here. So if I look at that name attribute that came over when we ported from Salesforce, you're seeing what that representation looks like, and you're able to use that representation directly in your building process. All right. Now we have individual pages, but we've done this for a few different systems, right? When I showed you Salesforce, ServiceNow, Airtable, Power Apps. Let's think about how we can stitch all of that together. Because again, it's very difficult to interconnect between systems that speak different languages and have different ways to expose their services and connect to their services. So that's where the codeless definition comes in, because your workflows are also represented in the same way. So what I've done is I've created a workflow, which I've effectively dropped in each one of those modules that has the representation of the data model from one of those systems, right? I've also added in a summary page at the end. And this is, to go to show that once you've done it, it becomes one consolidated data model where I can then reference those fields anywhere throughout my application. So as I showed those snippets on the side here, that's how this summary page was constructed. By taking the attributes from any one of these systems and pulling it into the summary page, and you'll see as I demo this on the front end, how the data is going to automatically map and give you that consolidated view across all these systems. So now when I jump into the workflow, just go ahead and I'll preview it. Okay, that's going to pull it up, and let's just fill it out. Let's fill out some information. So we'll call it a coffee customer. We'll call it a coffee company. In the interest of time, I'm not going to fill everything out, but it should still get the point across. I'll jump over here, and now I'm into my next thing, which is an idea that a customer may have. So let's say the cost for the idea was $10,000, and let's say this is a coffee idea. Again, jumping through to our next model that came over from another one of our sister. Maybe there was an issue that came up from the idea that someone gave. We've certainly seen that. We'll call it a coffee issue. I'll go to the second to last one, which is our Power Apps change. So let's say we have to make a change based on that issue. We'll say when, because this mapped over that it's a data attribute from that system. We'll call it a coffee change, and we'll call it version 1 here. And now let's go to the next one. This was where we mapped over a spreadsheet, a data model that was being used inside of a spreadsheet. And you can see here we can even do files. Files, the ability to upload a file, store a file securely, also all consolidated within that standard. So for that, I'll send it to coffee@unqork.com, and we'll send that tomorrow. And I'll hit next. And now here you have that summary page, right? Where all of those data attributes that I filled out earlier are presented to me together because of that mapping back to the standard. All right. Now, what else do we see there? We also see that this becomes available via API. All of your data that was once stored in 5, 6 different APIs, or in the case of a spreadsheet, maybe no APIs and no good way to get that data, share that data, connect that data to other systems you have, now gets represented in a single place here. Okay, so that's wonderful, because now Unqork can become that source of record that sits on top of these legacy applications that you have. Now let's take it a step further, okay? Because you might still have logic and other business processes that are tied into these various systems. And we don't necessarily need to lose that. You don't need to make a one-step migration right over. So let's connect this workflow now back into all of those systems. And to do that is extremely straightforward, right? So I said we auto-built those connectors for you before. So all we need to do to talk to those systems is tell our workflow, when you're done with this page and the user's entered their information, assuming it's valid based on the business rules that you set up, that you send the data into that system. You use our plugin component to create a record there. So I'm going to jump in here and I'll add that to create. I'll do the same thing on this. I'll do the same thing here. And finally, I'll do it here. Now, of course, I won't do it on the spreadsheet one because there is no API, where there's no other system for that. We'll save our workflow again. We'll preview it one more time. I'll come in again and I'll go coffee customer 2, coffee company 2, just so it's different data than before. Again, I'll do it once again, just the required fields, coffee idea 2, coffee issue 2, and we'll just choose our date again, coffee change 2, version 2 this time, down here, coffee at Unqork, and again, we'll send it tomorrow. Right? So now, once again, it looks the same from the end user perspective. Once again, it sits within the API at Unqork. But also now, if I go into each of these systems, you're going to see the data lives in there as well. So now we've created that coffee customer. If I refresh it in ServiceNow as well, you'll see the coffee idea. Airtable's got the coffee issue, and Power Apps upon refresh has the coffee change. There we go. All right, so now it's actually connected in one setting change. You're still talking to all those systems, and anything again that you might still have in there is going to run on top of it. Now I want to show one more version of,
Nick, just to stress how, what you're doing is basically 5 different system integration points, seamless.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming each of those prevented the user from injecting custom code, we could bring in the definition. In this case here, what you're saying is, assuming there is a screen in one of those tools, Salesforce, Power Apps, ServiceNow, Airtable, even Excel, we could seamlessly integrate that screen and bring it over as something which could be embedded in any part of Unqork and seamlessly update that tool to keep it in sync. Where if they add a new field in that tool, it could actually seamlessly come into Unqork. So it's ubiquitous development for the first time ever. That is codeless. That's codeless architecture in action, better than any place else. That you could see it all in one place. And there is no code in what you built. So, this probably took you, I'm guessing, how long did it take you to build the entire workflow with these systems?
The first time around, just to wrap my head around it, maybe a little longer, but then it became a simple mapping exercise and, maybe 30 minutes per system after I got that first one up and running.
That's awesome.
Cool. So I do have one more thing I want to show. So now, as we were saying before, the fact that the codeless definition is only representative of the logic and the business rules, and it's agnostic to how that actually is rendered. So what we've shown thus far is how it can get rendered in a browser, as one of the runtime engines that we have on top of the codeless standard, but it could be anything. It could be an API, something that gets executed purely server-side. So what I've done here is I've actually just moved all of my modules, this entire workflow, down into an automated lane of our workflow, which means run this on the server and effectively expose it as an API. So once I do that, I jump over to Postman, all right? And now I've mapped out the data that the API expects, all right? And I'm gonna hit send here as well. Now what it's doing is, you're seeing it's taking a second, it's running through that entire workflow and making all of those integration calls again to send that data in. So if I jump back and I look at our API, you have the coffee and no code API attribute I just showed you. And once again, you also have it available in those systems. So because that logic and that data, the validation and all of that is agnostic to the implementation, you can just see the many different ways that you're going to be able to benefit, the many different ways you're going to be able to utilize that logic and integrate that logic throughout. So.
Awesome. That's amazing. So, and that is very different in codeless architecture. The way we think of APIs versus the traditional API technologies, and I've used them all in my past life, so I know them all. The way we think of an API on Unqork is it's the same way you build a screen. So, example being, if you ask me to build an API today, and I'm an engineer for getting back a credit score, give me a social security number. I'm going to make a call to a credit agency and get back a credit score and pass you back the data. And as soon as I do that, you're going to say, that's great. You have an API. How do I test it? Oh, so go to Postman and test it. Okay, it works on Postman. Now let's go into build a screen to use it. Okay, let's create the screen and the HTML and the entire AJAX calls or layers to basically do it. It's great, works. The reality on Unqork is you start with the screen aspect. You start with, I'm going to get past the social. It's a data field. It's got a format that looks like this. It's got a regular expression. As soon as they enter in that, let me go out to the credit agencies, bring back the credit score. When you build that, it gives you your test harness, it gives you the API, it gives you the screen. It's a very different way to think through. And shockingly, when we look at our production deployments, half are actually headless APIs today in the codeless architecture spec. So it's amazing. Nick, that was incredible. Marcos, that was amazing. And I know that we went a little bit over here, but I couldn't stop that. That was just incredible to see and walk through. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing deep dives in each of the topics. So from integration, which is critical, to orchestration, to presentation, all of these we're going to be driving in deep. And I'm going to be bringing the superstars of Unqork together to basically walk through those concepts and technologies and basically show it. Here's how it is, here's how it works. One of the biggest difference between us and every other solution out there is not only do we create the standard, but it actually works for the most complex needs out there, which means your costs, your efficiency gains go up, which is what you want. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I look forward to the next session. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Marcos. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.